now the latest around the wide world of tropics. Tropical Weather Bulletin for November 13th. Several storms are active around the tropics right now. Eta, Theta, Vamco, and a new tropical cyclone in the South Indian Ocean. This November 13th, we've now had 96 tropical storms around the world this year. So the Atlantic continues its streak of ridiculous proportions of activity. Eta off the coast of the US, about to die off that actually, and Theta just there near Madeira. Tropical storm could affect the island, and a 90% chance in the Caribbean Sea, which could become our next significant tropical cyclone. The Eastern Pacific has a 50% chance now in play, so we may not have seen the last of the season there, day 193. This system, if it did form, shouldn't affect land. It should remain out at sea and probably peak as a moderate tropical storm. In the Western Pacific, we've got Vamco, which is now moving away from the Philippine Islands, thankfully, but unfortunately it's headed towards Vietnam and could still be a Category 1 by the time it gets there in a couple of days. Nothing else, though, on the horizon at last in the Western Pacific. In the Southern Hemisphere, the first tropical cyclone of the Southern Hemisphere now for the 2021 season. There is that tropical storm that would be moving towards the southwest and could become a hurricane equivalent system in the next few days. Should remain away from land though. North Atlantic looks like this. You can see Eta there becoming post-tropical, it would appear, off the coast of South Carolina. Also tropical storm Theta, which is so slowly losing its tropicality as well, but it's still there for the time being for probably a couple more days yet. And towards the center of the image there near the Caribbean, you could see that tropical disturbance that's going to develop soon into a tropical cyclone. Very high chance of that now. Eastern Pacific looks like this. You can see the tropics a little bit more disturbed than what has been the case recently. The easternmost congregation of clouds there will eventually materialize into this 50% chance, and whether it forms or not, well, that's still a coin toss right now. Taking a look towards the Western Pacific, there's Vamco, still fighting. It's still got an eye that's somewhat intact there. Become a much smaller storm though. Category 1, wind speeds estimated at 85 miles per hour, pressure 978. The rest of the Western Pacific pretty quiet, although part of Vamco's trail extends all the way up to Taiwan through the Japanese islands. The South Pacific looking fairly quiet, model indications showing that we might see a busy start to December, but nothing yet here in the basin. And in the Indian Ocean, with emphasis on the new cyclone in the southern Indian, there's also a disturbance that will be forming very soon to its west, and that also has a moderate chance of development, so we may have A and B straight away. Looking at the Eastern Pacific, temperatures still sustainable for a significant tropical cyclone. Some model ensembles suggesting that might happen, be very unlikely though. The Atlantic, Caribbean still plenty warm for significant cyclone development. That's what we're worried about in the Caribbean Sea, all the way up to the Yucatan Peninsula. Temperatures still up towards 28 to 30 degrees Celsius, widespread and extending just about towards the coast of Florida. Out in the open Atlantic, still fairly warm temperatures too for late season activity. Indian Ocean, fairly warm right now, extending into the southern Indian as well. 28s generally, up to about 30 degrees in particular, there's a few hot spots there. The Western Pacific, much the same. The Philippine Sea is much warmer. The South China Sea cooling off quite a bit after all of those tropical cyclones, so Vamco shouldn't be strengthening much. So let's take a look at the sea surface temperature anomalies. You can see the La Nina still well in play here and quite active towards the eastern central Pacific, the equator. In the Indian Ocean, warmer than usual, and in the Atlantic, still remaining generally warmer than average almost everywhere. Just the Gulf, a little bit of a weakness there after all of those storms that passed through, and still we've got above average conditions. On this day in 1977, two tropical cyclones, depressions at this stage, were in the Indian Ocean, either side of the equator. It sometimes happens that way. And Typhoon Kim was a Category 4 about to make landfall in the Philippines, causing moderate to locally severe damage. Also on this day, in 1967, Gilda was striking Guam, and in 1962 it was the day after Typhoon Karen, which struck Guam as a Category 5. So the Atlantic hurricane season naming list gets crazier by the day. The next name on this marathon season is Iota. In the Eastern Pacific, the next name is Polo, followed by Rachel. In the Central Pacific, we are still waiting for Hone. I've been saying that all year. In the Western Pacific, we've just had Vamco. The next name is Crovan. In the North Indian Ocean, we're still waiting for Gatti, even though we've had a few close calls with that name a few times this season. There could be something that forms in the Arabian Sea next week. And in the Southern Hemisphere, the next name in the Australian region is Imogen. The Southwest Indian Ocean will start with Alicia, and in the South Pacific, we're waiting for Yasa.